Everyone quotes the Dave Ramsey Millionaire Study, but here's the problem. The numbers don't actually tell the whole truth. That 10,000 millionaire study might sound impressive until you see how it's actually done. So today I'm gonna break down what the study didn't tell you, and of course, what the real data on millionaires actually shows. Hello, my fellow Ripplers. This is Chris Miles, your cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. This show is for you if you want enough passive income to become work optional, where you work because you want to, not because you have to. Hey, if you've liked these videos, besides just liking and subscribing on this channel too, feel free to follow us on social media with the Money Ripples, whether it be on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or whatever, TikTok. Be sure to follow us there today. Okay, let's talk about that Dave Ramsey Millionaire Study. Now, before anybody grabs their pitchforks, let me just say this. I am not here to bash on Dave Ramsey right now. That is not the purpose of this podcast. He's done a lot of good, especially for those people who are trying to budget, pay off debt, and do what it might be. However, when it comes to creating more wealth, this is where there tends to be some cracks in his advice. And especially when it comes to this millionaire study that doesn't quite all add up. And so I want to dig deep into what is that study actually telling us? What is this 10,000 millionaire study? Where does it come from? Are teachers really the actual biggest list, biggest percentage of millionaires out there, which I know a lot of people have questioned? What does that come from? How does it work? And of course, more importantly, where are the real millionaires? What are they doing right now? What's the real statistics? That's what I want to talk about right now. So let me start with that Dave Ramsey 10,000 millionaire study. So I actually dove pretty deep into this because I heard it quoted all the time, but I had a hard time finding real, tangible evidence, right? Now understand, when I went to college, this was weird. I was a sociology major with a psychology minor. And so I was really big, even though I loved social psychology and things like that. Some of my favorite classes were statistics and research methods. And so for me, I loved collecting data and be able to find real correlations. I didn't like the indirect correlations where it's like, for example, in the summertime, ice cream sales go up, drownings go up, therefore ice cream must create more people drowning. We obviously know that's an uncorrelated type of situation, right? But, obviously ice cream does not kill people, does not make people drown. But of course, because it's summertime, more people are eating ice cream and more people are swimming, therefore they both drown, right? The summertime is the common thread, not the ice cream. And I'm finding this to be true. The more I look deeper into these studies, I realize, wow, there's some things that really missed the mark. So let's talk about Dave Ramsey's study. What is this study, right? He says it's the largest millionaire study. In fact, I want to open up with this video because he references. So let's just kind of watch this video and see what Dave has to say about it. Okay, before we get started, let me just create some context on this caller. This woman actually sounds a lot like our own clients here at Money Ripples, those that are trying to do the work optional blueprint. It's very similar because this woman, she's trying to figure out, she's like, I think I should pay off the mortgage if we got cash. Her husband says we should invest it, right? We get couples that often have this debate. And of course, as you know, Dave Ramsey would say, pay off that mortgage, right? But don't cash out the 401ks, but cash out everything else. So of course, she decides to ask another question.
Can I ask another dumb question?
No, not dumb. These aren't dumb questions. These are great questions.
Do you ever recommend if you have investments, do you ever recommend taking those out and putting it towards the house?
Always.
Or no?
Always, unless they're in retirement account.
Notice it says always. Always a dangerous thing for a financial person to say.
Okay.
You want to know why?
Single stocks, sell them.
You want to know why?
Why?
Because when we studied the largest study of millionaires ever done in North America, over 10,000 of them, we never found them saying, we invested instead of paying off our home, and that's how we became millionaires. None of them say that.
Notice he says never. None of them said they would invest versus paying off a mortgage. However, listen to this.
Okay.
Almost all of them followed the model of a steady, reasonable amount of investing, like in their retirement accounts, then paid off the home and then increased their investing when the home was paid off. And so the typical person with, say, $1.5 million net worth, their first $1.5 million of net worth, had a $500,000 or $600,000 paid for home and about $1 million in their 401k. But the number of them that said,
Okay.
oh, we never pay off our house, instead we invested more and more and more and kept the house debt, was almost zero. It was less than 10%.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Boom, right there. Actually, I wasn't planning to bash on Dave Ramsey, but notice what he just said. He says, never ever have they did this, just a few seconds before. And then when he just say almost never, and he says less than 10%. So notice that number just keeps climbing up, right? Where there were people that actually did this. Now, here's the big question. Now, I think this video has a lot of other lessons as well that kind of tie in with my previous podcast episode just a few weeks back, talking about whether you should pay cash for a home or you should get a mortgage. That's a different debate, and really good episode. Definitely go check that out that we just did a few weeks back. But let's get right to this, right? He says that of this big, largest study ever done in America of 10,000 millionaires. I want to know where the study came from first, okay? Before we even talk about whether they invest or not, let's just talk about what his study actually is. So I went and researched it. Here's what I found. The study was actually a sampling of his own listeners. He says that Ramsey Solutions plus this other third party, I'm guessing that he outsourced a little bit to help gather the data, pretty much between late November 2017 to early into January of 2018. So about a month and a half study, about roughly 6 or 7 weeks, they gathered data of 10,000 respondents. This is not an independent survey. This is not something where they're actually taking a sampling. They literally went to the respondents, which is, guess who? His own people. So he'll quote from it, just like you heard him quote this lady, that eventually they'll have $1 million in their retirement accounts plus $500,000 home that's paid off free and clear, $1.5 million net worth, which, by the way, if you're at that point, that's about 8% of the nation's population. There's roughly about 8 million people that qualify in this. So he's saying he's got a sampling of 10,000 of these 8 million in the US right now. Now, he reports that, of course, most of them, 79%, don't receive inheritance. That, by the way, is kind of, most people don't receive inheritance that become millionaires. Most people are, quote unquote, first generation millionaires, or so we believe. That being said, right, as he's looking at this study, he's looking at how much time is in the market. Most of these people have been averaging, working and saving for at least 28 years. That's the pretty typical thing, even if they have $1 million net worth. He did say that 8 in 10 use a workplace 401k. Again, low spending, low debt, that kind of thing, right? Here's the thing that's interesting. He says the top 5 occupations, he quotes this all the time, is that it's engineers, accountants, teachers, management, and attorneys, right? So he always takes to say the top 5 careers of millionaires are not doctors, dentists, and things like that, or even business owners. Notice business owners are nowhere to be found here. Now, the reason is who are Dave Ramsey followers? He polled his own followers. So think about this. He polled his own followers, 10,000 of his own people. This is why he's able to get so much feedback so quickly, right? Because obviously you're polling people. I don't know if they did they might have done some phone surveys as well as some others. It didn't quite say, but definitely they were getting respondents from their own people. So he's sampling his own followers. Furthermore, right, on top of that, what he's doing is, of course, he's going through and he's looking at those careers. Well, why would a teacher? How would a teacher? I mean, that's the one thing that people always say, like, how would a teacher even become a millionaire like this? Now, this might give some people some hope. Now, there are a few things that could attribute to this. For example, if you include a pension that's later down the road promised, yes, that could be a lump sum that's coming to them later, but it's not actually like money in their pockets today, right? So that could be attributing to it as well. But remember, who follows Dave Ramsey? First and foremost, has been through a lot of the churches. I know this from my wife, having gone to Tennessee, been trained to be one of his instructors. Many people were preachers, teaching in their churches. Obviously, this goes to different groups. Don't you think that there's teacher groups he's involved in? Yes, right? And so his sampling comes from his own people. Well, of course, he gets his own sampling in these own people. Now, here's the truth, and this is my personal opinion. My personal opinion is with business owners, and a lot of business owners and investors I talk to that are millionaires and multimillionaires, my sampling, not a wide study, well, guess what? Many of them think that Dave Ramsey's full of crap. Now they do believe, like I do, that there are some good things he teaches, especially for people that are losing the money game, people that are below zero, people that can't afford even to live day to day, right? Or they don't know how to manage money. It's almost like remedial math. If you don't understand math getting out of high school, you need to go back to take remedial math in college if you're going to progress into doing bigger things. I totally believe that that's where Dave Ramsey has his niche, right? The problem where you start losing people, especially people that actually have become millionaires, is they say, well, yeah, that's true. And I'm not saying that people haven't become millionaires following his methods. That's not the case. But a lot of people that have become millionaires and done it much faster than 28 years, and they've done it without having to take big, big gambles, were people that said, yeah, we didn't do that. We actually didn't pay off our house early. We might have paid off our house later, but it wasn't early. We were doing other things by building our business, building our investments. They were doing that stuff outside. So like what this woman's husband's talking about, these guys have been doing. So there's two different methodologies. Are either not working completely? No, they both do work in different time frames, right? Definitely, you could do Dave Ramsey's method and get there in good 30 or 40 years. That's absolutely possible with a lot of discipline and saving and eventually paying down your house. And of course, the house is the big bulk of it, right? The retirement account, sure, not as much. But again, remember, this is just a sampling, 10,000. He's got millions of followers, millions of followers. He takes sampling of those 10,000 again through 2018 as well, right? So there's a lot of things that you look at, say, this is not a real study. This is just a poll that he took of his own people. If you were to poll my clients, they would say the opposite. They'd say, yeah, we started saving in the stock market, but then we switched and went into alternative investments. We started buying real estate and doing things that way, and then we became multimillionaires. So if you were to take my respondents, it may not be a 10,000 survey study, right? Quote unquote survey. But if you poll our people very consistently, you would see people say, yeah, we're making several $1,000s a month of passive income, and our net worth is over $1 million because a lot of them are accredited investors. I'd say about a little over half are accredited investors or became that later on because of what they did. And of course, they've invested in real estate or real estate backed investments. So if you were to take my survey responses, right, my respondents, you'd say, oh, well, look at this. Looking at all the numbers, hey, most of these people are either business owners, consultants, in IT, dentists or doctors, chiropractors, people like that. We get a lot of people just even from tech industry, a lot of people in the tech, especially, or they're in the healthcare field. Now, remember, that's also not representative of the whole market either, because here's the thing. If I'm in certain groups, right, like where I'm in certain, like I've definitely gotten more of a name in some of the healthcare type of industries or subsectors there. I've got more of a name with the IT people and got more followers because a lot of people I've noticed in IT are just looking for something better, right? They're good researchers. They want to find the right things and they want to be cutting edge. And so they find us, right? But that doesn't mean that if you go into being, an engineer or an IT person, right, or an IT manager, because a lot of our clients are managers in a lot of cases, or developers or something like that, you're going to say, well, yeah, I should do that too. I'll become a millionaire. No, that's not the point. The point is that's just who I've been talking to. Again, Dave Ramsey's been around a lot longer. He's had a much bigger sampling. Now, I've been around a while, right? But I haven't done all the mass stuff with all the radio syndication, things like that. I've been very niche. I was actually very comfortable and just didn't even bother trying to market and get a bigger voice and up until recently, even though I've been around doing this stuff for now almost 25 years. That being said, right, again, you start talking about his sampling, it sounds awesome. So this is the problem with this survey. It just doesn't hold water, right? Now, what does hold water? Here's the thing, to try to find which careers are which, honestly, I couldn't find a survey that really did a good sampling of who are the millionaires and what do they do, right? I couldn't find that. If you've been following this podcast, you're probably looking for great ways to create passive income right now, right? Well, we got you covered here with Central Lending. Central Lending specializes in alternative investments that actually are designed to create steady returns and long-term financial security for you and your family. Now, they prioritize transparency. They love, building those strong relationships, giving you that confidence and peace of mind, knowing that you have your money working harder for you, so you don't have to work so hard for that money. You want to learn more how to do that? Go to centrallending.com and check out what they've got today to create your passive income and wealth creation right now. Now, I know from my own experience with people I talk to, a lot of the people I do, but again, it wouldn't be a proper representation of what we're talking about here, right? And so, but I did see, here's one difference. For example, he mentioned nothing about business owners. Now, if you look overall in the United States, roughly about 10 to 15% of people own a business, right? Depending on who you talk to. And depending on how they define the business, because about half of business owners are solo entrepreneurs, they're self-employed, while the other half actually have employees. And that's roughly like 8% of people have employees. So that means almost half of people are solo entrepreneurs. Well, of those business owners, if it's 10 or 15%, that would say, oh, that's the overall sampling. If, and this is extrapolating it out, if there is no correlation between business owners and becoming millionaires, we would say, okay, well, that would imply that about, 10 to 15% of millionaires, based on the Fed study and whatnot, would say they're business owners. But they do actually say which ones own businesses versus not. They don't say what career they have, but they do talk about which ones are business owners. Guess what? 20%, roughly 20% of those are millionaires. So that means, yeah, you've got a better chance of becoming a millionaire if you're a business owner. And that shouldn't be a surprise to people. That should not be a surprise at all versus being an employee where your income is limited. It's capped, right? So that shouldn't be a big surprise. That's the only thing we could find. Now, what other studies can we find? Now, the Federal Reserve, they have their study of financial consumers, right? Which is more the sampling. Now, it's only gone up to about 2022, 2023 now. So that data is not perfectly up to date, but it's not far off. Let's talk about more about what has actually been determined about these people. Now, if Dave Ramsey is correct, all these people paid off their house, right? That's what they all did. He's like, all of them, all of them did this. And they even said nearly all, and then they got to less than 10%, right? Well, how many people actually have mortgages as millionaires? Let's take a look. So according to the Federal Reserve, which is the better sampling of what's going on, they say about 42% of families have some kind of debt on their home. 42%, that's nearly half. And you might just say, oh, they're big spenders. Yeah, but remember, they became millionaires still. And the definition of millionaires, just so you're clear, because there are different definitions. Even Dave Ramsey's definition, when he'd say like people would have at least $1 million of assets and $500,000 or whatever of net worth. Now, I would beg to differ on that because he has been known to exaggerate, as we just heard him do literally in real time on that video. I would say he's just going for $1 million net worth. So it could be possible that they might have a $500,000 home paid off and a $500,000 retirement account. And by the way, I'm okay with that. And so there are different studies, because there's another study that says only high net worth, which means you have at least $1 million of investable cash, not including your house, right? That's a different number. So 42%, according to the survey of consumer finances. On the Spectrum survey, it said about 1/3 carry a first mortgage, while 12% carry a second mortgage or a HELOC. So again, still, this is roughly about 40%, give or take. Now, that could still be roughly a third because maybe they only have a HELOC, but maybe they have a first and a HELOC, or a first and a second. But notice, it's at least a third of these people do have it. Now, there is a correlation. The higher the net worth, the more likely they are to have a paid off house. So when you start into the millions and millions and millions, yes, you might have a paid off house. This is something I've said consistently, is that, again, like, even though I don't care about paying off my house and I'm a multimillionaire, even though I don't care about paying off right now because I have a 2.75% mortgage, it doesn't mean that down the road, if I'm at the point where I say, you know what, I really don't care about creating any more passive income, even though I've got significant amounts of passive income coming in, but I want to just get that off my plate. I got cash burn a hole in my pocket. What am I going to do with it? I really don't want to invest a whole lot more or do this or that. Pay off the mortgage. Cool, I could do that. Now, I also know from a personal standpoint that I know that having a paid off mortgage can be great, but at the same time, could I have better use of that money? Sure, I can invest it more, which is why I haven't paid it off. I can keep finding things to do with my money. But that doesn't mean if markets shift or change and I start seeing less opportunity, I might just say, you know what? I think I'll go for the paid off house. Again, I've learned that lesson. Having equity in a house does not create safety, because if I want to stay in that home and I want to get the equity out, I may not be able to. And obviously, if I want to, if I don't need the cash, right? So I'd much rather have a lot of cash on the side than have a paid off house, right? That's my big thing. Now I have too much cash on the side, I'll pay off the house. Hope that makes sense. You do whatever you want to do. I'm not saying that's what you should do. That's just my own personal preference. And just, I'm willing to change my mind later. And I might tell you the same, right? Again, it depends on circumstances and what changes in your personal life, but also what's going on in the marketplace. So just remember, these people didn't have paid off homes. In fact, most millionaire, or many, many millionaires, millions more than what he's claiming, do still have a mortgage. All right. The second thing is, where do they invest their money? Now, he's saying they're all throwing it into retirement accounts. Now, I'm not saying that's not true, because of course I know that's true, because Many of you reach out to us where you have anywhere from several hundred thousand, sometimes in the millions in your retirement accounts and saying, okay, I've got all this money, but what do I do with it? How do I actually get my money to start working harder for me so I have to keep working hard for this money, right? What do I actually do? Well, that's one thing that I wanted to research here. Now, this was a little bit harder to find because, I could find a little bit on the SCF study that the feds have. For example, 13% of all families own other residential property, right? That could be a second home. It could be rental properties. So roughly 1 in 8, maybe 1 in 7 have some other rental properties involved besides just their own home. According to Spectrum, that study was about 19% own another house. Capgemini, that was another study I was looking at where they have more high net worth individuals. These are people that have at least $1 million of investable cash, not just million in net worth. They actually say that many people will report allocations towards real estate quite a bit. Like 19% of their portfolio is just in real estate alone. They also talk about like another 15% in that same one going to other alternative investments. So they're talking about roughly about 35%, over a third is going into real estate or other alternative investments, not just stock market, not just normal retirement accounts. That doesn't include other things they might be doing. That could include also, if they're high net worth, if they are business owners, the business could also be included in that number as well. Again, it really just depends. But usually when you start, depending on remember, this is high net worth, not ultra high net worth. That's where you get to like Tiger 21. Tiger 21, there's much bigger percentages going to alternative investments in real estate. We find a lot in saved cash. Like they'll often keep a good 20-25% in just cash or cash equivalents, including life insurance cash value and things like that, like we talk about. That's the ultra high net worth. These are people that usually have at least with the Tiger 21 study, usually $100 million or more of net worth. Again, different phase. It's not the cause and effect. Remember this, when you hear people saying, hey, this person I knew, like this uncle, this rich daddy Warbucks, this guy had, a paid off house, millions of dollars in the bank. I want to be just like him. Remember, he may not have started out that way. He might have became a multimillionaire before he paid off the house. He might have became a multimillionaire before he started investing in those different things. So there's different phases and stages you go through. But what I've witnessed, and especially what I've witnessed firsthand versus me being a financial advisor, telling people to follow the Dave Ramsey method of pay off your house and all your debt and save up in retirement accounts versus what I started teaching in 2006, which is now almost 20 years ago. I switched to instead passive investments, more like rich dad, poor dad. How do we actually create passive income, real investment income, if you were to call it that, because I hate how people have destroyed passive income, but investment income, how do we use that money to actually start generating cash flow now, which can also create more money and even create higher net worth faster? I have watched that over the last few decades actually work much, much faster. And in many cases, with a lot less risk of failure too. By the way, I got an episode coming out about risk versus failure. And so I've seen that work over time. And that's the thing is like, again, I'm seeing this from my lens. I know that I don't have the all-seeing eye. I know there's so many examples. And I would say that most people, because of how Wall Street's been pitching it, most people are going to have a good chunk of cash in Wall Street, if not all of their money in Wall Street, even if they're millionaires. However, that being said, I've shared this stat before. The average age of the person that actually does have at least $1 million in their 401ks and IRAs, according to Fidelity, is 59 years old. This means these people have been working for darn near like 35, 40 years to even hit that point, right? Where I've seen people do much faster. I had a client where he had just $250,000. He did save up in his retirement accounts, use that, put it into real estate, and then already that equity is worth over 2/3 plus with the other things he had, including his own personal home, which he's not paying off early, but still has equity. Guess what? He's over $1 million net worth. Even he was shocked. He's like, oh my goodness. He's like, not only am I over $1 million net worth, but even if you take out my house, he's like, now we literally are almost have $1 million of investable cash between properties and everything else that we have. And so they actually are net worth millionaires or accredited investors, even if they don't meet the income requirements to be an accredited investor. It's because they have the $1 million in net worth, not including their own house. That's impressive, guys. That's again, for somebody who had roughly like maybe a $400,000 net worth before, now 6 years later, now he's got like about $1 million net worth, not including the house. Now it's over $1 million if you include the house. I hope that makes sense. So again, I'm not trying to bash on Dave Ramsey, But it is so misleading when he makes it sound like this is the biggest study of millionaires across the country, but it's just pulling his own audience. Naturally, these people are going to have 401ks. Naturally, these people are going to have paid off mortgages because that's exactly what he told them to do. So, of course, they all do that very thing. That's not a reliable study, as he calls it. Not at all. That's not a study. Now, if you look at what is reliable, I will tell you, like, again, you look at the studies, there are a lot of people that have a mixture of these different things and don't necessarily have a paid off house and still become millionaires. That is the key, is that people still become millionaires without paying off their mortgage. People still become millionaires even if they don't save in retirement accounts. There is another way, and I think that way is even better. Again, that's arguable, and you can debate me all you want, and I'm okay with that. Because the truth is that I've got my own data on my side. We've got our own people that are doing it, and they started out doing Dave's method and then switched and saw an acceleration of their money happen. Is it overnight? Is it, get rich quick? Not at all. But get rich much faster than if they just did the slow, methodical method that, of course, based on whatever the market swings are doing, could actually be destructive to their own personal financial net worth and their own personal financial situation. So the choice is yours, right? But remember, don't just believe things just because these guys spat it off, just because he's been around a while. Again, he teaches good stuff, but don't believe that this study is a real study. Do your own research. Find out for yourself, just like I do, right? I literally spend sometimes at least an hour or two. In this case, I spent almost 3 hours researching this just for you so you can figure this out. Again, do your own research. Look it up yourself, right? You'll probably find some similar information I have. Maybe you'll find more. Awesome. If you find some other cool statistics, put it in the comments. I would love to hear about what you find as well. So what's your opinion on this? Do you think that that Dave Ramsey is correct, that that's what all millionaires do? Or do you think maybe there's more to the story than that? Again, if you always have questions, you can always reach out to us at moneyripples.com. But remember, go and make it a wonderful and prosperous week. We'll see you later.